So the Evil Dead franchise has been sort of enduring pop culture for a little bit over 40 years now. It's been around for quite a while. This is the first Evil Dead film in about 10 years. 10 years ago, there was a reimagining film that came out from director Fede Alvarez. It was the first film in the Evil Dead franchise to not be directed by Sam Raimi, who we know sort of ushered in this new era of horror with the Evil Dead franchise. And so now, 10 years later, they decided to revisit this well-known property in the horror landscape and make another film. But this is also coming off of the heels of a pretty successful television show that was on Stars for a few seasons, Ash versus Evil Dead, which brought back Bruce Campbell in the titular role as Ash, and also Sam Raimi was on board as producer. But again, Evil Dead has been around for quite a while, and this movie was actually slated to initially go on HBO Max, but the new leadership in that company decided to give it a theatrical release, and it had its world premiere a few weeks ago at the South by Southwest Film Festival. And I know we both were eagerly anticipating this new iteration and this new sort of reimagining of Evil Dead, considering our fandom of that franchise. And so, with all of that out the way, man, I will pass it over to you. What did you think about this new Evil Dead movie, Evil Dead Rise?
It's also interesting that I think, uh, uh, last year the Evil Dead video game even came out, I feel like within the past couple of years, they've been ramping up something in within the Evil Dead world again, from the video game, from Sam Raimi being a part of Doctor Strange and Multiverse of Madness, from Bruce Campbell speaking when the game came out and being a big part, I think, of that. And then the Evil Dead Rise trailer comes out, and I'm like, oh no, they're really doing something right now. This thing is this movie is in franchise is on the horizon of new beginnings, it looks like. So man, the trailer looked amazing. I could not wait to step into the theater and watch this film, man. Evil Dead Rise is a lot of fun for me, in particular. First, Evil Dead as a franchise, after seeing this movie, it has to be one of the most consistent horror franchises ever, if not the one at the top. Of course, you think about all the horror franchises and movies, usually there's only a couple good ones, right? Think about how many really good Friday the 13th there are. There's only like maybe two good Friday the 13th movies. There's a decent amount of Halloween movies, but there's a lot of bad Halloween movies too, and so coming in, man, after watching this film, Evil Dead to me has to be just one of those ones that every time they come out with something, man, it seems to be something of substance or something that people can latch onto, and this is no exception. I enjoyed every bit of this film. I missed the first 10 minutes. I have to give that caveat. My phone broke and I had to go get my phone fixed. And so I showed up to the movie like 10 minutes late. So I do know what I missed though, which is important. And this movie first is it's a great time, I think. It's a lot of the things I wanted to see out of it, man. There's a lot of things that comes with Evil Dead that you would just expect that to happen, and I think I was rewarded with some of those things throughout the film. But what makes this movie different than a lot of the Evil Dead films is it doesn't take place in a cabin in the woods like the original two did, at least, I guess, and the 2013 remake by Fede Alvarez. But it instead takes place in the city, right? And it's about something different, where in the 2013 version, that one's a little different as well, where it's about everybody being in a cabin because there's a young lady who's addicted to drugs, right? And so I think this is even seeks to add another layer. This movie is about motherhood and a little bit of sisterhood as well, but motherhood, and what it looks like between these two sisters going through two different walks of life within their motherhood, in the battle for survival and the undead and what that looks like, man. And again, I just had a blast. It's very well shot. Cinematography is exceptional. The acting to me is through the roof. Not through the roof, but I thought it was tremendous, especially when you're dealing with young actors and actresses. I think they just did a great job across the board. Gabrielle Eccles to me was like the child standout here. I thought she did really good. But Alyssa Sutherland as the matriarch, right? The mom is really like oh no, you came here and you did a great job as the main, I guess, deadite or evil in this movie. Outside of that, I love the gore in this film. I would argue maybe that 2013 still has more blood, but I think the way the tension is built in this film, that the blood that we even get in this film, it's no, it doesn't fall short at all. You're still going to get a ton of blood in this film. You're still going to get a lot of those moments that also make you laugh in this movie, right? The original Evil Dead was a little bit funny, and the 2013 one was like almost not funny at all. But I feel like this movie finds a nice happy medium between what Sam Raimi was doing and what Fede Alvarez was doing, to make you have a good time. Man, Alyssa Sutherland was having such a good time as the Deadite. No matter what she was saying, I feel like I was having a good time too, because I don't know. It's just it's just one of those things that I think when you watch it and you understand what Evil Dead is, you get what they're trying to do here, man. But overall, very much enjoyed this film. I had a blast in the theater. I actually can't wait to see it again. Like I said, I missed the beginning, which made the end make more sense. But I'm very interested to see what a potential new franchise for this property looks like, man, because they're doing a good job so far. And I think anytime I have as much fun as I did in the theater watching this movie, then there might be some more things to explore. So I'll have to see what they do from here on out.
So one of the rare things you can say about the Evil Dead franchise is that, in my opinion, there are no bad entries. Everyone brings something new and delicious to the table. The first one obviously kickstarted a new sort of element and era of horror. There was a lot of slapstick comedy infused in just the way that that movie was brought to life. And of course, Bruce Campbell played a huge, huge role in that, and just the lack of resources that they had on that film. Evil Dead 2, which is superior to the first one, but it's really like the same movie, but they just had more
Mhm.
money and more resources to just go back to the drawing board and kind of do the same movie again, but make it again more hilarious, more fun, use more effects in that film. Army of Darkness just takes a completely different route. It's almost like a hard reboot of the entire series. The reimagining that came out 10 years ago, as you said, was very much more a serious interpretation of that franchise and of that mythology that's been built across all these different decades. And now Evil Dead Rise again brings something entirely new to the table while still maintaining all of the things that you expect to see out of an Evil Dead movie. It's stylish, it's absolutely brutal, and it's really relentless once the film gets going. And this is not for the faint of heart. I know a lot of people that listen to our show are not fans of horror. This is not the movie to enter into as somebody who might be a novice to horror, because this is hardcore shit. And I think that all across my life, I've seen so many horror movies that sometimes it's really easy to become desensitized to the amount of blood that you see, the amount of gore, the violence. And I felt that way in a few points of this movie, but there were even a couple of times where I was even beginning to become a little queasy, and it got me a little uncomfortable at several points in this movie, because they do some things that are just so gnarly and so crazy. Just the imagination behind all of these sequences that they put together was really kind of awe-inspiring, and it left me thinking about the movie long after we left the theater. And also, outside of like the things that you expect out of an Evil Dead movie, what I really love about this movie and really the entire franchise is just how straightforward they are. They always
Mhm.
get right into the story. They don't waste any precious time with a lot of world building. We really just meet the characters. We kind of understand what their circumstances are, why they are where they are, and then we just get into the shit. And I always love that about these movies, that they just don't waste any time and they know how to dive right in. And I think even when you start to see sort of the inciting incident in this movie, because one of the hallmarks of the Evil Dead franchise is sort of the same things: the Deadites, the Necronomicon, which is, the Book of the Dead, which really causes all hell to break loose. All that stuff is there. But I think that the Necronomicon in this movie might have been the most scary book of all, because of just all the
Mhm.
imagery, which is like still seared into my head, and just the stuff that you see. It's like, wait a second, this might be the most intimidating demonic force in any of these movies that we have seen. And that was absolutely the case, because once the demonic presence takes over Alyssa Sutherland's character, who you see all throughout the trailers is the one that's primarily possessed by this demon, I mean, she's just relentless, and she's a force of nature, and really can't be stopped. And it becomes more and more horrific as the movie progresses. And as you noted, the fact that this film gets away from the cabin in the woods nature of what we're used to and goes into a Los Angeles apartment, introduces just an entirely new level of creativity that we haven't really gotten to explore with this franchise. It allows for new levels of gore that we haven't really seen. There's closets and bed
Hmm.
sheets and forks and knives and cheese graters. Like it's all sorts of stuff that you normally wouldn't have access to that all of a sudden become instruments to all of the demonic crazy shit that's happening from scene to scene. And there's also a ton of really, really cool shots here. I was just kind of marveling at the
Yeah.
filmmaking prowess of the filmmakers behind this movie. There's a sequence in here that's sort of shot from the perspective of an apartment door peephole. And it's just like a prolonged sequence. And I was just sitting there like, oh, that's really, really cool. Or even like the extreme close-ups that they had, or the use of the split field diopter shots. And there was even like a visual cue to Stanley Kubrick's The Shining. Like there's so many really, really cool things
Hmm.
here that aren't hammered over the head. They're not done so in a gratuitous nature. Like they're just really quick flashes of, I think, brilliance all throughout this movie that just elevate the filmmaking style on top of just all the scares and the frights that you get and that you experience. And then you get some really incredible lighting and production design, and the sound design also is on a different level. It's just all coming together, and it coalesces to a really, really fun and enjoyable experience. And I know the theater that we saw it in, which was a packed theater Friday night, people had a blast. You could tell all the folks that were super scared, and you could tell like the true fans of the
Hmm.
franchise who got everything that they wanted to see. It wasn't a perfect experience for me though. There are a couple of drawbacks that I just do want to call attention to. One is, and I don't want to get too much into the details of it, but if you've watched any Evil Dead movie, you know that there's never really just one Deadite. There's multiple Deadites, right? And so
Hmm.
that remains the case here in this film. And I think that what I wanted a little bit more out of some of the other Deadites that we see is a little bit more of a personality. I think Alyssa
Hmm.
Sutherland's Deadite totally rules the movie. You get all sorts of delicious stuff out of her, and just that performance. You can tell there's a ton of personality out of her. The other ones, not so much. They kind of come and go very quickly. I wanted to see a little bit more personality out of them. And then the only other gripe that I had with this movie was sort of the way that it bookends, which is the way, it sort of
Yeah.
begins and ends. Just kind of felt like I don't know, it just kind of felt like it was shoehorned into the film. It didn't really do anything for me. It
Hmm.
certainly explained how the book and the presence and the demons sort of transport from one family to another, but I don't know if it was completely necessary. It was just kind of one of those
Yeah.
things to just like throw you into the movie, but it didn't really do anything for me. But outside of that, this is a great movie, a great, great time. And again, if you're a true fan of horror, then there's really no reason why you wouldn't enjoy this. I do want to just quickly ask you, we're only about 4 months into the year, but we've gotten quite a few horror movies. We've gotten things like Megan and Knock at the Cabin, Scream 6, even to a certain extent others like Bo is Afraid, which is more of like a nightmare horror comedy, but it does have horror
Hmm.
elements. Would Evil Dead Rise be the best horror movie of the year so far to you? Do you think it's at the top of the list?
I think so. It's pretty close, probably between this and Scream. I really like Scream. And they both, to be honest, they both need rewatches at some point soon. But right now, again, just coming off the high of the weekend and how much I enjoyed that film, man, I'm gonna go with Evil Dead Rise for now. It might change again throughout the year. It might change on a Scream rewatch. Shoot, it could change on a Bo's Afraid rewatch, you know. But right now, I'm gonna go with Evil Dead Rise as being my favorite horror film so far of 2023.
Yeah, and it's also an interesting place when a lot of these films and franchises are newly minted franchises, even with like Megan, because we know that's going to get a second installment. Everything
Hmm.
is genre bending now. Things aren't just like isolated to
Right.
horror anymore. They're incorporating a lot of other genres. As we just said, Bo is Afraid has a lot of comedy into it, but there are sort of horror elements. Of course, Ari Aster very much has that background with his previous two films. Even Megan is like a sci-fi sort of dystopian comedy horror to a certain extent. Like
Hmm.
it leans
Yep.
more comedy. So it's a really interesting year that it's shaping up to be, and I can't wait to see what the rest of the year holds. But I would also so far put Evil Dead Rise at the top of the list just because of not only the legacy of the franchise, but just how true it stays to what it is while still giving us
Yep.
completely new flavors with this new installment. So folks, those are all of our thoughts on Evil Dead Rise. If you've checked out this movie, definitely hit us up and let us know what you think.